This video will teach you some basic illustration techniques that you can use in Photopea or Photoshop. And we are going to focus on creating a sphere in the color of your choice using mainly the shape brush and eraser tools possibly, and also working with layers and creating shadows and highlights and doing that all from scratch. So we are going to be making a basic circle look like a form or a sphere. Now this is just my example. You can see I have my cast shadow here. This is the shadow that is shown on the surface. Then we have our actual shadow here, the midtones, which are the colors in between. And then we have our highlight here, which is the white portion. So you can see I chose the color dark red for mine. You are allowed to choose any color. It just has to have an actual color. So black and white is okay as long as you have the gray midtones in the middle there. But it does need to have the highlight, the midtone, and the shadow along with the cast shadow. Now you will have access to reference images for this assignment. I find references really useful, especially if you are just starting creating a sphere. I created this one purely from memory because I have done lots of shaded spheres in the past in all different formats, whether that's drawing or painting or digital painting in this instance. So we're going to start off fresh here. I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to save this one as my example. It's always good practice to keep saving your projects as you work on them. Let's go ahead and refresh because I want to show you the starting point of where you will be for this assignment. So we're at Photopea. You can also do this in Photoshop as well. Basically, all of the same functions will be in Photoshop. They just might be in slightly different places. So we're going to start with new project, and we're going to set the size as, let's do 1500 pixels. Make sure pixels is selected by 1500. I'm going to call this a sphere. DPI, let's set that at 300. We want it to be a nice high quality image. If you're having issues, and I saw that I have to go back and change that. I should have changed the DPI first. My bad. But if you're having issues with things freezing, go ahead and just change that DPI or the size and lower it a little bit. So if it's freezing a lot, go ahead and lower the DPI to 200 or 150 and see if that helps. I'll click create, and here is my blank canvas. Now the first thing we need to do is set up our sphere, our circle. So we're going to go down here to the tool or the shape tools. Rectangle is the default, and we're going to right click. So right click with your mouse or trackpad, and we'll need to find ellipse. So ellipse is right here. Ellipse is for circles or ovals, and we're going to go ahead and click on that. Up here is the fill and the stroke. So just a quick talk about this. When I click and I draw a sphere or an oval or any shape, I control the fill and the stroke up here. So fill is whatever color you want to fill in to that shape. So you can see the color changes, and I just clicked on that color. And it allows me to change it. Stroke is outline, so that's the border, basically, an outline around the object. Right now we have the cross selected, which basically means no stroke, but if we wanted to add an outline, I could just click here, I could choose my color, and then I can also choose how thick I want that outline to be. So you can see it thickened up quite a bit. I rose it up to 43 pixels. I can lower that and raise that as much as I want. As long as it's a shape layer, you can edit it within the shape tool. So if I click out, you can see that it disappears and I'm not able to change the colors. But if I go back to my ellipse tool, you'll see that I have access to the fill and the stroke. And that's a very common feature, especially when dealing with shapes and the pen tool. So get used to jumping around if you're doing something else and then you want to go back and you want to change the colors. Just remember to click on the actual shape tool. Now I'm going to actually get rid of the stroke. I don't want an outline, so we're just going to make sure that the X is selected for stroke. Fill, right down here, we can just click on the color panel here, and this will let you pick what color you want. You get to decide the color. Typically, you'll want to choose a color that's more in the middle of the color palette. So rather than choosing a really, really dark color, because that can be kind of a challenge to include your shadows and highlights. So kind of in the middle, just focus on that. If you're doing black and white, again, in the middle of that spectrum. So anywhere, between here and here is probably a good place to choose kind of a middle gray. I'm going to do a blue sphere for my example. So I'm going to choose about maybe this color here. You could also choose all the way up here if you want. Nice bright color. I'm just going to choose one that's a little duller. Again, in the middle is a good place to be. You don't want to be too bright or too dark on the spectrum. So here we go. This is a good middle blue, I would say. One thing I didn't do though, this was just my example shape. I didn't make sure that the sphere was perfect. So let's go ahead, and I'm actually going to delete this one. So I just press delete on my keyboard. I have the ellipse tool selected. I have my fill color. I'm going to hold down shift on the keyboard. I'm going to start right about here and click and drag with my mouse or trackpad. And this will make sure that I have a perfect circle. So we know that it's perfect because I held down shift. I can still move that circle around. Since I have the snap turned on, it should, and I also have guides, you can see when I bring it over, you can see that plus sign there. Basically means it's in the dead center of the canvas. If you want it in the center or if you want to offset it, I like to offset because I like to have a little extra room for my cast shadow. So something like this is just right. All right, so we have our base down. Now you can decide what are you going to do first. I personally like to start with the highlight next, which is going to be the white portion. So right over here in the layers panel, we can see shape 1. I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, and we're going to double click where it says layer 1, and I'm going to call this highlight. Now highlight basically means the brightest point within your object. So let's go to my brush tool, which is right here. And we're going to make sure that white is selected because we want to use white for the highlight. Up here is where we control the size and the hardness of the brush and the type of brush. And I'm just going to choose a regular brush, but I'm going to make sure the size is appropriate and the hardness is all the way down. We want it to be a very soft brush. Now, when you bring it over here onto the canvas, you can see there's an outline. I can make that outline bigger or smaller just by dragging on the size. Now you decide the size of the highlight. This is probably a good place to be. I'm at 409 pixels. That's fine. You don't need to mess too much with this. If you want to increase smoothing, you can. I will definitely be increasing smoothing later on when I'm doing all of the midtones and the shadows. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I'm on the highlight layer, and we'll click right here. See what that looks like. I think that looks good. I could also move it just a tiny bit, add a little more if I feel like it needs more. I think just the 1 is actually fine. So I just clicked once. It's nice and soft. If it doesn't look soft, it means you left the hardness up. So if I just click here, you can see there's no softness. It just looks like a hole. We need to make sure that the hardness is all the way down for the majority of the painting we're doing on this sphere. Now, the next step, I think, which is the most logical, is adding the actual shadow. So we're going to add black at the corner here. Now you kind of have to imagine where your light source is coming from. This is all about light, really. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a little light bulb here. All right, it's going to look probably kind of funky. All right, light shining down. All right, this is my light bulb. We'll erase it later on. Okay, the light's shining down this way. So that informs me or tells me that the shadow needs to be on the left side. The cast shadow is also going to be on the left side. If the light was over here, the highlight would be here and everything would be reversed. So just remember that as you're doing this. I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. We're going to call this one shadow. Make sure you're on this layer. And I'm going to make sure black is selected, which it is. We'll go up to the brush. I'm going to increase the size and make sure the hardness is low. And I'm going to go to about there. Now, if I just start trying to do the shadow, this is what's going to happen. It's not going to look at all realistic. So let's go back. First, I need to actually click on my shape. I'm going to right click on object selection, and we're going to find the magic wand. Now the magic wand, when I click on the shape, will let me actually highlight just the entire circle. So nothing on the outside. So if I went and I drew on the inside of this, it's not going to go on the outside. And it says it's not editable because I haven't rasterized it. So let me right click on that shape and we'll rasterize. It just means making it a normal layer. So as you can see, as I'm drawing, I'm not getting a ton on the outside here. I can just erase that. All right, and I think my selection has something set up here, so let me see here. Yep. So I just noticed as I was drawing, it was kind of feathering on the outside, and I was like, why is it doing that? And then I realized that I have feathering selected on here. So let's lower that to 0. That's just from a former project I was working on. All right, brush tool. We have it a good size. We have black. We're on the shadowed layer. Now I'm just going to go ahead, and the key with doing shading. Oh, I wonder if I have to do that selection again. I think I might. There we go. All right, I did the selection again. Now it shouldn't feather. The key to doing good shading here is to follow the shape of the sphere. So follow the shape of the circle. Like there, I kind of got a little off, so I'm just going to kind of go back. If you get too much, don't worry at this point, because we can always go back and add in more color. So you're just kind of following the general shape that you're seeing. If you're having issues with that, I'm going to go back here, show you. We'll increase smoothing, maybe like 30 or 40. I don't like it to be too much, otherwise it gets to be a little laggy and hard to control. I just kind of follow the shape of the circle. That's a little better, I'd say. It's key not to just do a straight line, so you kind of have to make like a crescent shape. And again, if you feel like you went a little too far, we can adjust that later on. So there's my shadow. Now I'm going to do a new layer. I'm going to keep that selection on. The little dancing ants are selecting the circle. Let's call this a mid-tone layer. So we're going to focus on painting in the mid-tones on this one. What I mean by mid-tones are any of the color blues in between here. So I'm going to go ahead and use my eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select the blue. So this is the same blue. It's now selected. And I'm going to just choose some different shades here. So I'm going to go one step down, and we'll go like right here. All right. And let's make sure that highlight is the top layer. So let's move highlight to the top, if it will let me. There we go. All right, so highlight's at the top. That's always going to be on top of everything. I have mid-tone selected. We'll use the brush tool to do this mid-tone. I'm going to leave a little bit of that blue showing through the original blue. When it's very, very close, I might actually darken that a little more. There we go. And I'm going to make this brush just a tiny bit smaller. Again, keeping that circular shape, and it is going to be a soft brush. So you can see there's my mid-tone, my first mid-tone. Now I'm going to go into that color again. We're going to lower that again, go darker, like a navy blue. I'm going to do my next color. Okay, keeping that shape again. And you can kind of play with that as needed. Okay, and looking again, I think I might need to do it just a little bit darker, like a really dark blue right about at the edge here. And that will be the last color. Oftentimes in spheres, especially depending on the lighting, sometimes there's a little bit of light that bounces off at the bottom. If I open up my example, you'll see that I did keep that. So a little bit of light there, so you can go back in, and even on that mid-tone layer, I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit of that lighter blue. I used that eyedropper tool. We'll just put a tiny bit in there. And that's going to help it look more realistic. So just add a little bit of a highlight or mid-tone there. All right, looks pretty good. I'm thinking it's not bad. I might go back in and just adjust the shadow a little bit. So I'm going to go on my mid-tone layer, and let's just put in just a tiny bit of black. I'm just going right on the edge here, just to darken that up a little bit. There, I'd say that's pretty good. Last but not least, we're going to do our cast shadow. So for the cast shadow, I'm actually going to use the shape tool, and we're going to use the ellipse. For the fill, we're going to do black. So go ahead and select black. You don't need a stroke. And let's go ahead and just draw out a generic kind of oval here. Okay, we're going to make sure that that's all the way down beneath the shape, so it'll look more natural. Feel free to adjust that, but just make sure it's on the right side, depending on where your light is actually hitting. And I'm going to right click on that shape layer, and we're going to convert it to a smart object, and then we'll rasterize it. And there are lots of ways to soften this shadow, the way I like to do is just click on filter and then go to blur. We're going to go to motion blur. So I'm going to make this, the distance is going to be wider. You can see it kind of blurs the edges here. I'll click OK. Angle is 0, which is fine. Click OK. And then I'm going to do it once more. We'll go to filter, blur, motion blur. I'm going to change the angle to the top here. We'll go to about 90 or so. And then I will increase the distance there. So you can see it's softening the edges around the whole ellipse. I'll click OK. Now at this point, I'm pretty much done. All I need to do is make sure that I erase this little extra light bulb. I don't need that there. So I'm going to use my eraser tool to erase that. So let me go ahead and do that. Erased. And at this point, I'm pretty much all set. You can certainly put your name on it if you'd like, or just leave it as is. As you're working, again, it's not a bad idea to save as PSD, just so you have a backup. And then when you're ready to actually export it and upload it to Google Classroom, you'll go to File, Export As, and we're going to export them as PNGs, which are really nice, high-quality images, perfect for portfolios, and it makes it look really nice. Wonderful study to show that you understand some basic digital painting techniques. Go ahead and click on PNG. You'll click Save, and then you can upload that to Google Classroom to show that you understand those basic techniques and how to paint a sphere all by yourself using a mouse or the trackpad. So if you have something that looks like this, congratulate yourself. You did a wonderful job, and we'll move on to our next assignment.